Mommy!
What is it?
I had a bad dream.
What about, honey?
It was about people bid rigging and involved in anti-competitive conduct.
Antitrust Resolution Story Time. Starring Danielle and Elizabeth McKay. With special guest, Benny the Bear.
Look, Mom, it says it's for big kids too.
Oh, yeah. Dedicated to the members of the Surplus Line Association of California. When involved in meetings or other activities of the association, members of the association should be mindful of the antitrust laws and not engage in discussions or conduct with the purpose or effect, directly or indirectly, of fixing or stabilizing premiums or producer compensation, engaging in bid rigging or false quotes for insurance, engaging in potential anti-competitive conduct or activities that could adversely affect the cost, quality, or availability of insurance products or services, or engaging in any other anti-competitive conduct or activities affecting their businesses or the business of insurance. Members are advised that violations of state or federal antitrust laws may result in civil and/or criminal penalties, and that any member acting contrary to the intent of this resolution shall be subject to disciplinary action under the association's constitution. The antitrust resolution keeps the market healthy, fair, and competitive. The end.
You've been admonished.
The SLA's vision is to be a modern, credible leader in the surplus lines industry. This vision will be achieved through continuous focus on competence, expertise, service, and innovation. In keeping with its prescribed purposes and powers, the SLA will function as an ally to the public, a resource to the industry, an asset to its members, and a great place to work for its employees. Welcome to the Surplus Line Association of California's 2020 annual meeting. And now, please welcome the chair of the SLA, Robert Gilbert.
I remember the day when the secretary had to read the antitrust resolution, and if you really wanted to fall asleep, that's exactly what you needed to do, instant relaxation. I want to thank Danielle, Elizabeth, and especially Benny the Bear for performing in our video. Did a great job. First of all, welcome to the 2020 SLA annual meeting. I'm at least until the conclusion of this meeting in Los Angeles, the chairman of the Surplus Lines Association of California. Thank you again for being with us. We have a very full agenda, but I want to start with a quote that I listened to it watching a movie, and I went, "This is perfect for starting off the annual meeting." And it came from a movie called Breakthrough. I don't know if anybody saw that movie, but it's based on a true story. It's about a teen that falls through icy lake in Missouri, and has no pulse, literally had no pulse for 45 minutes, and managed to recover. And it was really because of prayer, right? And the quote was, "Yesterday is not ours to recover, but tomorrow is ours to win or lose." And I said to myself, well, if this goes okay, this could be a good day for me, right? So I know it will be, and I know that you will enjoy the program. We've got a lot of interesting things to tell you. But to start off, I want to recognize a few people that have passed in 2019. We lost one of our longtime leaders, David Hartock, who's a dear friend of mine, had a long career in wholesale insurance, rising to become president and CEO of Sherwood Insurance Services, and capping his career as the CEO and chairman of Swett & Crawford before retiring in 2003. In 1993 and 1994, he served a term as chair of an organization called NAPSLO, now WSIA. He is remembered for his visionary approach to unifying the membership and his embrace of emerging new technologies for transactional brokers and MGAs. His advocacy of designating network at the NAPSLO convention led to the formation of the Brokers Lounge, which is still a staple of the WSIA annual marketplace. If you'd be kind enough, let's take a moment to remember David. I'd also like to pay our respects to one of the SLA's own who left us last year. Pamela Boyes was the SLA's Vice President of Human Resources. Pamela started at the SLA as the Vice President of HR in 2015. Her experience and knowledge of human resources made her a valuable addition to the SLA senior staff and asset to the organization. Her passion for HR was evident in her continued innovation. She created fun and educational activities for the employees. She spearheaded the SLA's wellness program and refined the SLA's benefits, compensation, and performance processes. Pamela loved the outdoors, cycling, hiking, as well as the arts, and traveling to her home state of Michigan to visit her family. She was a devoted and vocal alumna of Michigan State University. And if you'd be kind enough, let's pause for a minute to remember Pamela. Thank you. Remembering the people who have meant so much to our industry is one of the most important functions a trade association can serve. And there are many more important functions that the SLA undertakes as well, which is laid out in our vision statement. Our vision is to be a modern, credible leader in the industry. We do this by serving as an ally to the public, a resource to our industry, an asset to our members, and a great place to work for our employees. These principles inform our goals and our actions, and to that end, I would like to review some of the key achievements that the SLA has made during my 2 years that I've been fortunate enough to lead the association and to chair it. When I became chair of the board of directors, Ben McKay asked me, what type of director do I want to be during my 2 years? And I said, what I always like to do is educate, and I said educate again and educate a third time, as that is what I have done in my career for the companies that I've worked for. Providing educational resources and materials ties in well with the mandates from our vision statement up there to be an industry resource and asset to our members. Last year, we took a major step forward in making education much more accessible to our members in several ways. In 2019, we began hosting some of our in-person CE seminars at member offices. We took on this initiative because we know that it can be difficult for members to take the time to go to LA or to San Francisco. And we wanted to provide opportunities that might be a little bit closer to home and a little less disruptive to the workday. I was proud that my company, Markel, volunteered to be the first to host one. We had it in Woodland Hills, which anybody knows, Woodland Hills, the insurance capital of the world. And to be honest, it was so well attended that we had to turn people away. But we certainly understood as an organization and association that a lot of the younger people that can't get away to go downtown if they're in the outskirts could not attend the CE classes. So we felt having it within the communities that they worked in would be beneficial, and it's really worked for us. Also last year, we launched the SLA's online learning center, The SLA Learning Center is a one-stop shop broker portal where brokers can log in and manage their profiles, shop for continuing education courses, monitor their continuing education credits, and have quick and easy access to our most requested bulletins and frequently asked questions. The Learning Center was created to allow brokers to manage their continuing ed, as well as to have quicker access to specific information that they need. SLA offers on-demand courses in addition to live seminars, and these on-demand courses are housed in the Learning Center. Since I'm talking about the Learning Center, I'd like to pause here for a moment to honor one of the people who was instrumental in making it happen. You know, the SLA has been around for a long time, 83 years to be exact, and many of us who know Pat McCauley, who is our Senior Vice President for Education and Compliance, and has been with us for more than 25 years. That's nearly a third of the association's existence. Can you imagine being in one place for that long a period of time, besides me? I can imagine it. Not only has Pat been with us for a significant part of our history, she has contributed greatly to it and has personally crafted much of it. Before she took over the Education and Compliance Department, she spent most of her career at the SLA in our Data Analysis Department, which she still bears a stamp even today in many of the procedures and processes. The Learning Center we launched a year ago will be one of the key points of a long, accomplished legacy. Later this month, Pat will celebrate her well-deserved, well-earned retirement for the SLA, and today I'd like to present her with a token of our esteem and gratitude for her many years of service and her long list of contributions to the association and to the Surplus Lines community. Pat, if you will, please come forward. Pat, have a wonderful retirement. Another area, the SLA registered a monumental achievement in 2019 by eliminating its filing backlog. And to be honest, any of my former chairs will vouch that it was and still is, up to a point, not really, thank God, one of the many projects that was continuously on our slate during our meetings, and I'm happy to report that we are pretty much up to date. The modernization of our Data Analysis Department's computer-based filing system laid bare a backlog problem of a magnitude that surpassed anything that we had imagined. While SLA staff always knew they had a filing backlog, they did not have a sufficient analytical tool in place to know with certainty of how much they actually had. In moving towards eliminating as much use of paper as possible, staff created the California Automation System, known as CAS, primarily to get away from using 1 million sheets of paper every year. When they flipped the switch on the new CAS in 2017, they learned that the backlog was more than 240 days. In no small part by the record growth of our marketplace that has experienced over the last few years. Based on the 5-day work week, that meant an 11-month backlog. Once the magnitude of this issue became clear, the SLA attacked this problem by every means at its disposal. As we enter 2020, the SLA has now eliminated the backlog. This was the result of the amazing organization-wide effort, but in particular due to the diligent and persistent work of our Data Analysis Department. And for that, I am going to clap. I'm extremely proud of the strides of the SLA has made in the last 2 years in enhancing our educational offerings and getting our operations in order. My 2 years as chairman has been one of the highlights of my career. Great things are ahead for all of the many dedicated employees of the SLA who serves its members, assists the Department of Insurance, and volunteers in their communities. Thank you for the honor of serving as your chairman.
Welcome to Miami Mutual Bank. How may I help you?
I'd like to cash this check here, and then I'd like to take you out for a steak dinner.
Are you a real life pilot?
I sure am, little lady.
The jump seat is open.
It's been a while since I've done this. Which one's the jump seat again?
Dr. Connors to the ER. Dr. Connors to the ER.
This is irrefutable evidence that the defendant is lying.
Special Agent Hanratty, FBI.
Hello, Carl.
You're gonna get caught. It's like Vegas. The house always wins.
Some nuts flying around the country posing as a pilot, calling the James Bond of the sky.
Hello, Pusher. This is by far the best date I have ever been on.
He's a kid. That's why he doesn't have a record.
30 milligrams of codeine every 4 hours. Do you concur? I concur.
Dr. Harris,
Yes?
do you concur?
Concur with what, sir? Ma'am, I'm sorry to have to tell you your son is forging checks.
I have a payroll check here I'd like to cash.
I'm working part-time at the church now. Just tell me how much yours and I'll pay you back.
$1.3 million.
I'll be choosing 8 young ladies to be a part of Pan Am's future stewardess program.
South America, Australia, Singapore. These are so perfect the bank doesn't even know the difference. What do you want?
To apologize.
You didn't call to apologize, did you? You have no one else to call. I'm looking for your son.
I would never give up my son. If you were a father, you'd know.
Stop chasing me.
I can't stop. It's my job.
You see these people staring at you? They keep peeking over their shoulders, wondering where you're going tonight. Where you going, Frank?
Don't tell me not to fly, I've simply got to. If someone takes a spill, it's me and not you. Don't bring around a cloud of terrain on my parade.
Sir, we're gonna let him get away.
No, Carl. You let him get away.
Nobody had a better rain on my Merry Christmas parade.
I'm getting close, huh? You will go to prison.
You're gonna have to catch me.
Good afternoon, folks. Pleasure to have you here. Normally, when I walk up to the podium, it is to talk about fraud, counterfeiting, embezzlement, cyber crimes, and things of that nature. But today, I've been asked to do something a little different, talk about my life in which the film Catch Me If You Can was made. As you know, I've had many people tell my story. I had a great writer write a book about my life, had a great film director make a movie about my life, had a great Broadway musical team make a Tony Award-winning Broadway musical about my life, and of course a popular television show on TV for 4 years, White Collar, great around my life. Most of those very creative people have actually never met me personally, but they have enjoyed telling my story from what would appear to be their point of view. So I thought I would take just a few minutes to tell you the story from my point of view. After that, I'll be happy to take a few questions as well. I was born and raised just north of New York City in Westchester County, New York, in a little town called Bronxville. I was actually one of 4 children in the family, the so-called middle child of the 4. I was educated there by the Christian Brothers of Ireland in a private Catholic school called Iona in New Rochelle, New York, where I went to school from kindergarten to high school. By the time I had reached the age of 16 in the 10th grade, my parents, after 22 years of marriage, one day decided to get a divorce. Unlike most divorces where the children were always the first to know, my parents were very good about keeping that a secret. I remember being in the 10th grade when the father walked in the classroom one afternoon and asked the brother to excuse me from class. When I came out in the hallway, the father handed me my books and told me that one of the brothers would drive me to the county seat in White Plains, New York, where I would meet my parents and they would explain what was going on. I remember the brother dropped me at the steps of a big stone building, told me to go on up the steps of my parents would be waiting for me in the lobby. I remember climbing the steps, seeing a sign on the building that said family court, but I wasn't quite sure what that meant. When I arrived in the lobby, my parents were not there, but I was ushered into the back of a men's courtroom where my parents were standing before a judge. I couldn't hear what the judge was saying nor my parents' response, but eventually the judge saw me at the back of the room, so he motioned me to approach the bench, and I walked up to stand in between my parents. I remember distinctly that the judge never looked at me. He never acknowledged I was standing there. He just simply read from his papers and said that my parents were getting a divorce. And because I was 16 years of age, I would need to tell the court which parent I chose to live with. I started to cry, so I turned and ran out of the courtroom. The judge called for a 10-minute recess, but by the time my parents got outside, I was gone. My mother never saw me again for about 7 years, till I was a young adult. Contrary to the movie, my father never saw me or ever spoke to me again. In the mid-1960s, running away was a very popular thing for young people. A lot of them got caught up in Haight-Ashbury, the hippie scene, the drug scene. Instead, I took a few belongings from my home, packed them in a bag, boarded what was then the New Haven and Hartford Railroad for the short train ride down to Grand Central Terminal in New York. My father did own a stationery store, but actually in Manhattan. It was located on the corner of 40th and Madison. Like all of us, we had to work in the store, so I made deliveries in the summer for my dad. I knew the city very well, so I started looking for the same type of work. There were a lot of signs on the window: stock boy, delivery boy, part-time. I'd walk in and apply. So tell me, young man, how old are you? 16. How far did you go in high school? 10th grade. I'll hire you. And I went to work for a small amount of money, few hours a day, but I soon realized I couldn't support myself on that amount of money. I also realized that as long as people believed I was 16 years old, they weren't going to pay me any more money. At 16, I was 6 foot tall. I've always had a little gray hair. My friends in school used to say that once a week when we dressed in a suit to attend mass, I looked more like a teacher than a student. So I decided to lie about my age. In New York, we had a driver's license at 16. Back then, they didn't have a photo on it, just an IBM card. So I altered just one digit of my date of birth. I was actually born in April of 1948, but I dropped that 4, converted it to a 3. That made me 10 years older, or 26 years old. I walked around applying for the same type of work. People did give me a little more money, a few more hours, but it was very difficult to make ends meet. One of the few things I had taken when I left home was a checkbook. My father had opened a checking account for me at a small community bank in Mount Vernon, New York. I had a little money in that account, so every so often I would write a check to supplement my income, $20, $25. The funds were there, the checks were good, but it was my friends, my peers, who would constantly say to me, "You know, you're the only guy I know walks in a bank in the middle of Manhattan. You have no account there. You don't know a soul. You talk to somebody behind some desk and they okay your check." "Oh, well, my checks are good. I walked in that bank. They wouldn't touch my check. You walk in, they don't bat an eye." Years later, reporters would write and speculate and say that that was my upbringing. Mannerisms, dress, appearance, speech, whatever it was very easy to do. So consequently, when the money ran out, I kept writing those checks. Of course, the checks started to bounce. Police started looking for me as a runaway. So I thought maybe it was a good time to start thinking about leaving New York City. But I was quite apprehensive about going to Chicago, Miami. Wondered if they'd cash a New York check on a New York driver's license in Miami as quickly as they did in Manhattan. I was walking up 42nd Street one afternoon about 5 o'clock in the evening, 16 years old, pondering all of these things, when I started to approach the front door of an old hotel that used to be there called the Commodore Hotel, now the Grand Hyatt. Just as I was about to get to the front door of the hotel, out stepped an Eastern Airline flight crew onto the sidewalk. Couldn't help but notice the captain, the co-pilot, the flight engineer, about 3 or 4 flight attendants dragging their bag to the curb to load it in the van. As they loaded the van, I thought to myself, that's it. If I could pose as a pilot, I could travel over the world for free. I probably could get just about anybody, anywhere to cash a check for me. So I walked up the street a little further to 42nd and Park. I went to cross over, but I heard a huge helicopter. So I looked up, and there was New York Airways landing on the roof of the Pan Am building. Pan Am, the nation's flag carrier, the airline that flew around the world. I thought, what a perfect airline to use. So the next day, I placed a phone call to the executive corporate offices of Pan Am. When the switchboard was ringing, I had absolutely no idea what I was going to say. When they answered, "Pan American Airlines, good morning, could I help you?" "Yes, ma'am." "I'd like to speak to somebody in the purchasing department." "Purchasing? one moment. And the clerk came on and said, maybe you can help me. My name is John Black. I'm a co-pilot with a company based out of San Francisco. Been with the company about 7 years. Never had anything like this come up before. What's the problem? Well, we flew a trip in here yesterday. We're going out today. Yesterday I sent my uniform out through the hotel to have it dry cleaned. Now the hotel and the cleaner can't find it. Here I am with the flight in about 5 hours, no uniform. Don't you have a spare uniform? Certainly, back home in San Francisco, but I would never get it here in time for my flight. Do you understand this will cost you the price of a uniform, not the company? I understand. Hold on, I'll be right back. And he came back and said, my supervisor says you need to go down to the Well-Built Uniform Company on Fifth Avenue. They're our supplier. I'll call them and let them know you're on the way. Well, that's exactly what I wanted to know. So I went down to the Well-Built Uniform Company. Little fella, Mr. Rosen, fitted me out in the uniform. They were black gabardine, the 3 gold stripes on the arm, the gray hair. I certainly looked old enough to be the pilot. When he was all done, I said, how much do I owe you? Well, the uniform's $286. I said, no problem, I'll write you a check. No, we can't take any check. Oh, well, then I'll just pay you cash. No, we can't accept cash. You need to fill out this computer card. Then in these boxes, put your employee number. And we bill this back under uniform allowance. Comes out of your next Pan Am paycheck. Well, that's even better. Go ahead and do that. New York had 2 airports, LaGuardia and Kennedy. LaGuardia was 20 minutes from Manhattan. Kennedy was 50, so naturally LaGuardia being the closer of the 2, that's where I went. I spent most of the morning walking around LaGuardia in the uniform, trying to figure out now that I had the uniform, how the hell do you get on these planes? Well, I got a little hungry about lunchtime, so I walked in the luncheonette, sat down at the counter on the stool, and ordered a sandwich. Moments later, a TWA crew walked in. Flight attendant sat in the booth, but the pilots up at the counter on either side of me, captain right next to me. Now, back before deregulation of the airlines, airline people thought of themselves as just one big family. They didn't hesitate a moment to talk to each other, and the captain kind of leaned over. Hey, young man, how's Pan Am doing? Doing just fine, Captain. Tell me, what's Pan Am doing out here at LaGuardia? Pan Am doesn't fly into LaGuardia, they only fly into Kennedy. Well, I picked up on that right away. Yeah, we came into Kennedy, had a few-hour layover, came over to visit some friends. Matter of fact, I'm on my way back to Kennedy now. So tell me, young man, what type of equipment are you on? Now, airline people have a lot of jargon for things, and one of them, they never call a plane or an aircraft. They call it equipment, what type of equipment you're on. Well, what type of plane do you fly? Back then, a DC-8, a 707. Of course, I didn't know that, and I thought, what type of equipment am I on? Only equipment I'm on is this stool. They must mean what type of equipment is on the planes I fly. So I thought, well, they got the wings, they got the engine. They always had a sticker on the engine, who manufactured the engine. I said, yes, General Electric. All 3 pilots kind of just stopped eating and leaned over. Captain said, oh, really? What do you fly, washing machine? So I knew I said the wrong thing. Out the door I went. Everybody had an airline ID card, a plastic card, much like a driver's license today. Yet without the ID card, the uniform was worthless. Went back to Manhattan pretty discouraged, thinking where would I come up with the Pan American Airline corporate ID. I was sitting in the hotel room. I noticed the big, thick Manhattan Yellow Pages on the dresser, so I pulled them down on the bed and flipped them open and looked under the word identification. There were 3 or 4 pages of companies who made convention badges, metal badges, plastic badges, police badges, fire badges. Started to call around, and finally one company said, listen, most of those airline IDs are manufactured by Polaroid, 3M company. Need to call one of them. Finally got the 3M company on the phone in Manhattan. Yeah, we manufacture Pan Am's identification system, along with a number of other carriers. How come? So I'll tell you, I'm a purchasing officer for a major U.S. carrier. I'm in New York just for the day. We're getting ready to expand our routes, hire a lot of new employees, go to a form of ID. We're very impressed with the Pan Am format. Wondered if I came by your office this afternoon briefly, we could discuss quantity and price. By all means, come on by. So I went by dressed in a suit, and the sales rep opened the book. Yeah, we do United, National, Braniff, Pan Am. Pan Am. We like this Pan Am format. Wonder if you have a sample I could bring back. Sure, I'll be right back. And he brought me back a 5x7 glossy piece of paper with a picture of an ID card blown up in the middle of it. Someone else's picture in the picture, John Doe for a name. And in bold red ink across the front, this is a sample only. I said, no, I'm afraid this won't do. And I need to bring back an actual physical card. And by the way, What is all this equipment on the floor? We don't just sell this card. We sell the system, camera, laminate, so we have to buy all this. Absolutely. Well, I'll tell you what, since we have to buy it all, why don't you just demonstrate how it works and use me? Fine, have a seat right here. Took my picture, made it the door I went. I was going down the elevator studying the card, had a blue border across the top, about 1/4 inch in Pan Am's color blue, but not a single thing on the card said Pan Am. No logo, no insignia, no company name. This is a plastic card, like a credit card. Couldn't type on it, couldn't write on it, couldn't print on it. Discouraged, put it in my pocket, headed back to the hotel. As I was walking back, I noticed that I had passed a hobby shop, so I turned around and walked back. Excuse me, sir, I see you sell a lot of models here. You sell models of commercial jetliners? Sure, over there. And I bought a model of a Pan Am 707 cargo jet, took it back to my room, opened the box, threw all the parts out, but there at the bottom of the box was a sheet of decals that went on the model. And when soaked in a glass of water, the little Pan Am blue globe that would have went on the tail of the plastic plane went perfect up at the top of the plastic card, and the word Pan Am and the special styling or graphics that would have went on the fuselage went perfect across the top of the card, and the clear decal on the laminated plastic made a beautiful identification card. Pan Am says they estimate that between the ages of 16 and 18, I flew more than 1 million miles for free, boarded more than 260 commercial aircraft, in more than 26 countries around the world. Pan Am says keep in mind that though Frank Abagnale did in fact pose as one of our pilots for a long extended period of time, he never once stepped on board one of our aircraft. That's true. I never flew on Pan Am because I was afraid someone might say, I'm based in San Francisco, never met you before. Or someone might say, your ID card is not exactly like my ID card. So instead, I flew on everyone else. If I wanted to go somewhere, I literally just walked out to the airport and looked on the board, United Flight 800 to Chicago. Then I went downstairs to the door marked United Operations and walked in. The operations clerk, hey, Pan Am, what can we do for you? I was wondering if the jump seat's open on 800 and he did it to Chicago. It's open this evening. I'd like to get a pink slip pass. I'd give him my ID, write me out a pass. I'd walk out, hand it to the flight attendant. She'd open the door to the cockpit, and I'd step in. There you had a captain, a co-pilot, a flight engineer, and a seat behind the captain called jump seat, where pilots deadhead on company time. Now, because pilots love to talk shop, once you picked up that jargon, it was the same conversation over and over and over. So I just step on board, even Jen Bob Davis be arriving in Chicago. On the taxi out, always the same question. So, Bob, how long you been with Pan Am? Been flying about 7 years. What position you fly? Right seat, which is airline terminology for a co-pilot. What type of equipment are you on? Had that one down. Perfect. Matter of fact, whatever they flew, I didn't fly, so I had no problems with that. When I would arrive in Chicago, I'd go by the Pan Am ticket counter, but just enough to get the attention of the passenger service rep. Yes, sir. 2 years since I've laid over in Chicago? Yes, sir. Parma House Hilton downtown. Catch a group bus, lower level, door 3 app. I'd go down the Parma House Hilton, walk in. On the corner of the registration desk was a little sign that said Airline Cruise. That was a 3-ring binder. You signed in, referenced your flight, showed your ID. They gave me a key. I'd stay 2 or 3 days. Pan Am would be direct billed for my room and my meals. As you know, I went on to impersonate a doctor in a Georgia hospital for a while. I actually took the state bar exams in the state of Louisiana. I passed the state bar. I went to work for then Attorney General P.F. Grimion in the Civil Division of the State Court, where I spent about a year. During my time as a doctor and as a lawyer, no one ever doubted for a second I was not that individual. It was I on my own who resigned and left. Of course, like any criminal, sooner or later you get caught, and I was no exception to that rule. I was arrested actually just once in my life, at the age of 21, by the French police in a small town in southern France called Montpellier. The French police were actually arresting me on an Interpol warrant issued by the Swedish police, who were looking for me for forgery in Sweden, but believed I was residing in France. When the French authorities took me into custody, they quickly realized I'd forged checks all over France, so they refused to honor the warrant and Sweden's request for my extradition. They later convicted me of forgery and sent me to French prison. I served my time in a place called the Maison d'Arrêt, the house of arrest, in a small town in southern France called Perpignan. Steven Spielberg told Barbara Walters it was extremely important to me to go back to that prison, to the exact cell he was in, and reconstruct it according to the logbooks during his stay there. which he said to my amazement that was a blanket on the floor, no mattress, a hole in the floor to go to the bathroom, no plumbing, no electricity. He said, according to the prison's logbooks, I entered the prison at 198 pounds, left the prison at 109 pounds. When my sentence was over in France, I was extradited to Sweden, where I was convicted of forgery in a Swedish court of law and sent to a Swedish penitentiary in Malmö, Sweden. When my prison term was up in Sweden, U.S. federal authorities took custody of me, returned me to the United States. Eventually, a United States federal judge in Atlanta, Georgia, would sentence me to 12 years in federal prison. I served 4 of those 12 years at a federal prison in Petersburg, Virginia. When I was 26 years old, the government offered to take me out of prison on the condition I go to work with an agency of the federal government for the remainder of my sentence until my parole had been completed. I agreed and was released. This year, I'm celebrating 44 years at the FBI. I have been at the Bureau for more than 4 decades. I work out of Washington, D.C. I make my home in Charleston, South Carolina. Every Monday, I board a 1-hour flight to Washington, and I return home on Thursdays. I live in Charleston with my one and only wife of 43 years and my 3 sons. My youngest boy graduated from University of Beijing in China. He went on to get his master's degree there. He reads, writes, and speaks Chinese fluently. He spent 10 years in Beijing developing video games for a San Francisco company called Glue Mobile. His games became so popular in Chinese in the market that they eventually brought him back to the United States. He's in Dallas now. He's a senior producer on the 25th anniversary edition of Doom, a game when he played when he was just a little boy. My middle son and his wife graduated from University of Nevada in Las Vegas. They own a chain of stores based out of Charleston, deals with college girls' clothing. They've had that business for about 10 years. And my oldest boy, who's 41, graduated from University of Kansas at KU. He went on to Loyola School of Law in Chicago to get his law degree and pass the bar in Illinois. Went on to make his dad very, very proud. He's an FBI agent. He's celebrating 14 years in the Bureau. He is our unit chief over our section that deals with kidnappings. He's based out of Quantico, Virginia. As many of you know, I had very little to do with the film. I would have preferred not to have a movie made about my life. I raised my 3 boys in the same house for 25 years in Tulsa, Oklahoma, long way from Washington, D.C. And for 25 years, I commuted to Washington, and for 25 years, my neighbors had no idea who I was. But Steven Spielberg said he felt compelled to tell the world the story, not because of what I did as a teenage boy, but what I had done for my country. In the end, my family were very pleased with the film, and we thought in the end, eventually it'd be forgotten. I never dreamed that Catch Me If You Can would go on to earn more than $1 billion for DreamWorks, be shown over and over on television, become a Broadway musical, and a popular television show. Consequently, today, every time I go to work on Monday, and I say this without exaggeration, I have emails on my desk. Sometimes a few, sometimes quite a lot. They come from all over the world, from people as young as 8, people as old as 80. They're seeing it for the first time on Netflix now. They're reading the book for the first time, or their high school's performing the play, and they feel compelled to write. When they do, I'm sure they figure I'll never see their email, and certainly they're not looking for a response. They just feel compelled to write. Some write and say, you know, you were brilliant. You were an absolute genius. I was neither. I was just a child. Had I been brilliant, had I been a genius, I don't know that I would have found it necessary to break the law in order to simply survive. And while I know that there are people fascinated by what I did 50 years ago as a teenage boy, I've always looked upon what I did as something that was immoral, illegal, unethical, and a burden I live with every single day of my life and will until my death. There are many who write and say, well, you know, you were certainly gifted. That I was. I was one of those few children that got to be raised by a daddy. The world is full of fathers. But there are very few men worthy of being called daddy by their child. I had a daddy, loved his children more than he loved life itself. Steven Spielberg would later write that the more I researched Frank's youth without ever having met Frank, couldn't help but put his father in the film, to the likes of Christopher Walken. My father was a man who had 4 children, 3 boys and a daughter. Every night at bedtime, he'd walk into your room. He was 6'4". He would drop down on one knee, kiss you on the cheek, pull the cover up, and he'd lean down and put his lips upon your earlobe and whisper deep in your ear, "I love you. I love you very much." He never, ever missed a night. As I grew older, I sometimes fell asleep before he got home, but I always woke up the next morning, knew he'd been by my bedside. Years later, my older brother joined me in my room for a while. He was 6'4" in the Marine Corps. He went on to make a career playing semi-pro football for Buffalo, but my father would walk around to his bed, hug him, kiss him, whisper in his ear he loved him. When I was 16 years old, I was just a child. All 16-year-olds are just children, much as we like them to be adults. They're just children. And like all children, they need their mother and they need their father. All children need their mother and their father. And though it is not popular to say so, divorce is a very devastating thing for a child to deal with and then have to deal with the rest of their natural life. For me, a complete stranger told me I had to choose one parent over the other. That was a choice a 16-year-old boy could not make, so I turned and ran. How could I tell you my life was glamorous? I cried myself to sleep till I was 19 years old. I spent every birthday, Christmas, Mother's Day, Father's Day in a hotel room somewhere in the world where people didn't speak my language, and the only people that associated with me were people who believed me to be their peer. I always knew I'd get caught. Only a fool would think otherwise. The law sometimes sleeps, but the law never dies. I was caught. I went to some very bad places. My boys have grown up asking their mother, "Why is it that Dad gets up in the middle of the night and goes down the TV room?" Because he doesn't turn the TV on. He just sits there all night. Because there are things you can't forget, things you're not meant to forget. While I was sitting in that pitch black cell in France, my father, 57, was climbing the subway stairs in New York as he did every day. He was in great physical shape. He just happened to trip. He reached his arm out to break his fall. He slipped his head on a railing, and at the bottom of the steps, he was dead. I didn't know he was dead. I was sitting in that cell thinking about him, how much I couldn't wait to see him, hold him, hug him, kiss him, tell him how sorry I was, but I never got the opportunity to do that. I was very fortunate because I was brought up in a great country where everyone gets a second chance. I owe my country 800 times more than I will ever be able to repay it in my lifetime. That is why I'm at the FBI today, 36 years after a federal court order has expired requiring me to do so. I have turned down 3 pardons from 3 sitting presidents of the United States, including the last one, because I do not believe, nor will I ever believe, that a piece of paper will excuse my actions, that only in the end my actions will. 43 years ago, on an undercover assignment in Houston, Texas, I met my wife. When the assignment was over, I broke protocol to tell her who I really was. I didn't have a dime to my name, but I eventually asked her to marry me against the wishes of her parents. She did. And I could sit up here and tell you that I was born again, or I saw the light, or prison rehabilitated me. But the truth is, God gave me a wife. She gave me 3 beautiful children. She gave me a family. And she changed my life. She and she alone. Everything I have, everything I've achieved today, who I am, because of the love of a woman and the respect 3 boys have for their father, something I would never, ever jeopardize. There comes a time in all of our lifetimes where we grow up and we have children. And whether your child's 3 months old or 41 years old, when you lay your head on a pillow at night and you're just about to close your eyes, the last thing you think about, the last thing you worry about, the last image you see are your children. So if you still have your mother, you still have your father, You give them a hug. You give them a kiss. You tell them you love them while you can. And to those men in the audience, both young and old, I think the biggest lesson I learned from all of that was the answer to that very simple question of what is it to actually be a man? It has nothing to do with money, achievements, skills, accomplishments, degrees, professions, positions. A real man loves his wife. A real man is faithful to his wife. And a real man, next to God and his country, put his wife and his children as the most important thing in his life. Steven Spielberg made a wonderful film, but I've done nothing greater, nothing more rewarding, nothing that's brought me more peace, more happiness than simply being a good husband, a good father, and what I strive to be every day of my life, a great daddy. Thank you very much for having me today. It's a pleasure. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you, sir. Thank you. They gave me about 10 minutes to take a couple of questions. Those questions can be about the movies, cybercrime, identity theft, whatever you'd like to ask a question about. And someone has a microphone, a couple of microphones in the audience if someone has a question.
I'll just ask, I guess.
Okay.
A question for you as you think about the insurance industry. What kind of threats do you think we should be most concerned about from your perspective?
Yeah. Well, first of all, as you know, I'm extremely concerned about in the real estate business where we have so many cases now of a young couple who have spent years saving up to buy a home. They've finally got $40,000, $50,000 to do so. They go find the perfect home. They fill out all the paperwork with the bank and their realtor and process everything. And then one day they get an email, supposedly from their realtor, saying it's time to send your deposit to the bank, and here's the wiring instructions. Turns out that's not the realtor, and of course the money is, in a matter of moments, is shipped overseas. That couple's out their money and out their dream. Most of the time we find this happens because the realtor used his personal AOL account and not the account of the company he worked for. Today we have about 5,000 phishing emails every single day in the United States, amounting to about $12 billion in losses annually. We do track those phishing emails. They go out to about 112 countries around the world, so we know they're not generated here, they're generated overseas. What I do want to share with you is I've been following these emails for many, many years. I also, part of my duties is to be an instructor at the FBI Academy, where I have taught for 40 years. I have taught 2 generations of FBI agents as I do today. I've seen a lot of phishing emails, and up until a couple years ago, they were pretty ridiculous. Bad spelling, bad grammar. You could pretty much tell they weren't real. That's all changed now. The phishing emails that come across my desk now, and I'd like to share 2 of them with you, one on a business side, one on a personal side. The one on the business side comes from a company here in Southern California with about 4,000 employees, ironically a technology company. It is supposedly an email from their CEO to their CFO, and it read as follows: "Good morning, John. Wonderful dinner at your home last night. Please thank your wife, Helen. My wife, Susan, and I truly enjoyed your company, truly enjoyed your beautiful home. As I had mentioned to you over dinner, I am traveling this week to Nashville, Tennessee, and I'm going to a meeting. I will not be back until next Monday. What I forgot to mention to you is I need you to wire $35,000 to this charity this morning. I promised would have it by 10 o'clock. Please see this is taken care of. Jeff." The other email was from one friend to another friend. "Dear Barbara, great having lunch with you today. We need to do that more often. I hope you and your husband Randy and the kids have a great time at Disney World this week. When you get back, give me a call. We'll do lunch again. By the way, I saw this on YouTube. Thought you'd enjoy it. The link is below. Signed, Joan." What they're basically doing is going to social media, because the CFO and the CEO have already had pictures of them and their wife up there, including their family. The CEO said 2 months earlier on Facebook that he was going to this conference that he had registered for in Nashville, Tennessee. And of course, she said she was going to Disney World. She has pictures of her son, her husband's name, her children's name up on Facebook. They're taking information off of social media in real time and simply using that to make the email so real that you wouldn't hesitate for a moment not to think that it was from that individual. A few months ago, I spoke on behalf of McKinsey & Company in Las Vegas to 3,000 bankers. When I was having lunch with a group of them, they said, let me tell you how bad it is. If my client is my very best friend, as well as my client, and I just played golf with him yesterday on Sunday, and I receive an email from him at 9 o'clock in the morning on Monday, and it says, "Morning, Robert. Not a great game yesterday. What did you think of what I did on the 8th hole? And you know Jay scored this. Steve scored this. Great game. Looking forward to next weekend. By the way, I forgot to mention yesterday, you need to wire these funds out for me this morning. It's critical. I need you to do it by 10 a.m. Here's the wiring instructions." I have to call him because I know on Facebook he already said information about the game, who he played with, what happened on the 8th hole. So I have to call him and say, did you actually send me this instructions for wiring money? That's how bad it's gotten. So obviously, yes, you have to be extremely more careful today. There is not, and there never will be, including AI, that can defeat social engineering. You can only defeat social engineering through education. 2 weeks ago, I was here at Salesforce speaking to 2,000 of their employees in that new building, explaining to them the importance of keeping the data that's been entrusted them safe. That's the most important job, whether you're the CEO or you're the janitor. And how to recognize when someone is trying to socially engineer you to get information from you that you are totally unaware that they're extracting from you in that conversation. We'll only stop these crimes through education. Education has been and always will be the most powerful tool to fighting crime. Anyone else have a question? Finally, I'll leave it with this because someone asked me, more than one person, about credit versus debit because I've written so much about it. I don't own a debit card. I've never allowed my 3 sons who are adults and married with children to have a debit card. Many, many years ago, I've written, as you know, several books on financial crimes. On the last edition of a book I was writing, I asked myself and stopped, what is the safest form of payment that exists in the United States? And the answer was credit card. Credit card, not credit debit card, credit card. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, Discover Card. Every day of my life, I spend the credit card company's money. I actually never spend one dime of my money. No one knows where my money is because it's exposed to no one. I go to the dry cleaner, I give them my credit card. Go to the grocery store, I give my credit card. Get on the plane to come out here, I give them my credit card. I will do everything in my power to make sure no one gets my number, but if they do and tomorrow they charge $1 million on my credit card, by federal law, my liability is 0. I have no liability. When I use my credit card and I pay the minimum due or the full amount, my credit score goes up. I keep raising that score. When I use my credit card online, and I love to shop online, if they don't deliver the merchandise because it's a fictitious site, credit card company makes me whole. If I buy an expensive German camera, it comes broken, they try to claim UPS did it, I don't get in those arguments. I just have my credit card company make me whole. In every breach, and I've worked every breach back to 15 years ago, TJ Maxx, up until recently, Facebook, Marriott Hotels, and Capital One Bank. Every breach in a post-investigation, the consumer, I was in Target, but to be honest with you, I used my Bank of America Visa, so the next day they canceled my card. And then 2 days later, FedEx delivered me a new card. That was the last I heard about it. Now me, I used my debit card off my credit union. They got into my account, they stole $3,000. I had to wait 3 months while they said they were investigating to get my money back. I had 3 months of not access to my money. I had 3 sons that went off to college. I said, I'm not giving you a debit card. I've applied for a credit card in your name. so it's your card. Of course, you're 18, you have no credit, so I guaranteed it. That means three things are going to happen. Every month the bill comes to me, I'm responsible for the bill. If you're spending a lot of time in the bar, I'll know it because I pay the bill. Number two, I set the limit. You go to school in China, this is your limit. You go to school in Nevada, this is your limit. You go to school in Kansas, this is your limit. And every month that I pay the bill, it goes on your credit. So I guarantee you, when you graduate, your credit score will be 800 or higher. You want to buy a house, buy a car? You can do that without me. Today, one of the best things you can do with your children is to start them early understanding the importance of building credit in their name. This is not 30 years ago when credit was, do I get the car, do I get the house? Everything today is based on your credit. You apply for a job, they check your credit. You apply for life insurance, they check your credit. You apply for auto insurance, they check your credit. Everything is based on your credit. And teaching young people at an early age to use their credit and build their credit in their own name is one of the best things you can do. And finally, because I always get an email later, how do you get cash? Now, first of all, if you use Venmo or any of those things that young people like, I have no problem with them as long as you backed it with a credit card. I'd have big problems with it if you backed it with a debit card. But if you backed it with a credit card, I don't have any problem with those financial payment programs. When I want money, I have said to my bank, I want you to send me an ATM card. Do not send me an ATM debit card. Do not send me an ATM card with a MasterCard Visa logo. I want strictly an ATM card to access money from an ATM machine. This way I can go anywhere in the world and access my money, but I'm governed by the same federal statutes that govern that credit card. I have zero liability, no matter what anyone does. And if I already own an ATM debit card, I tell the bank, drop that debit to $1, so that my exposure is never greater than $1. I do have a website, it's just my name, abagnale.com. Obviously, I sell no products, I provide no services, I endorse no companies. It is strictly an educational site. But what I do is every year I publish 22 pages of a 4-color booklet I put up on my site for businesses protecting consumers, small and large businesses. Everything you want to know about embezzlement, check forgery, cyber crimes, identity theft, protecting your children's identities, all of that is up on my website. Every year I do 2 interviews with USA Today, 2 interviews with the Wall Street Journal, and 2 interviews with Wired, all relating to cyber. They ask me questions, I respond, they're Q&As. Once they publish it in their newspaper, I put it up on my website. So every year you can see in the most current terms how I answered their questions and their concerns about cyber. And remembering that education and teaching our employees is the most important thing to preventing crimes. It's been a pleasure spending a day with you. Thanks for having me. Have a great meeting. Thank you.
Frank, before you leave, I just want to say one thing. It finally occurred to me. I definitely see the resemblance between you and Leonardo DiCaprio. You know, we talk about cyber, and one of the questions I'm always asked, and I know Ben will address it also, is what does the SLA do? And one of the great things that the SLA does is they guard against those latter threats through its financial analysis department, which analyzes surplus lines carriers to help ensure that our brokers are placing policies with carriers who can take on the risks and make customers and consumers whole in the event of a claim. Surplus lines industry is well aware of the special obligation it has to write business in a very prudent way, given the lack of a guarantee fund that is available to the admitted carrier. The special care given to ensuring the solvency of our companies and the safety of our consumers is evident in the fact that our industry has seen only one insolvency in the last quarter century. Our financial analysis department plays a vital role in ensuring policyholders' safety, fulfilling the plank of our vision statement that calls on us to be an ally to the public. Susan Bryant, who took over as the head of the financial analysis after Linda Chang retired, is herself retiring this year. She's done an amazing job of re-engineering her department, hiring some of the sharpest minds in the business to ensure that we're fulfilling our duty to California consumers and the surplus lines marketplace. Although we are lucky enough to have her on staff for a few more months, I personally would like to take this opportunity here to present to her a symbol of our gratitude for all she has done during her time as the head of financial analysis. Susan, would you please come up to the front and be recognized? All right.
Please welcome the CEO and Executive Director of the SLA, Benjamin McKay.
Good afternoon. Thank you for joining us. We're honored by your presence at our meeting, this vitally important meeting. And why is it important? It enables us the opportunity to handle some association governance that is necessary and right that we do so, but it also gives us a chance to talk about the industry and be transparent with you about what's going on inside the association. And by you, I mean not just our members and our AVRs, but also other important stakeholders, like our colleagues from the California Department of Insurance. This is a chance for us all to be talking in public about what's going on at the association and the industry. My presentation is going to have 3 parts. The first part relates to this map you see behind me. This is a heat map that shows where our members live. All these dots, clusters, you see there's little numbers in there. It's also in your annual report. So if you can't see this, the book that was at your place, it's in there as well. We did this just to figure out, well, where is our membership and who are our members? And for those of you who don't know, you become a member of the association by operation of law once you get a California surplus lines license. So once you get your license, boom, you're a member. So it turns out, once we created this heat map, there's a lot over here, right? We're over here. It was very interesting to us to realize that more than half of our members don't live in California. So this changes, in some ways, how you create your systems, how you govern, and so forth. Now, it's notable that all the risks related to the policies that we review are located here in California. But all the companies that Susan Bryant and her team review are outside of the state. By definition, they have to be outside of the state. So there's a lot going on outside of California that we deal with. Notably also, however, you guys matter more because you're the only ones who are allowed to vote. You have to be a resident surplus lines broker in order to vote. So you get the added weight of that. So what do we do when you look at this map and you realize, okay, our members are all over the country and they can travel anywhere in the world. And every one of these is a potential filer. So every broker has the ability to file. One of the key functions, and one of the things we're trying to do today, if it hasn't become obvious, is let you know what we do. And one of the things we do, obviously, is we review for legal sufficiency all of those policies. Why do we do that? Well, we do it on behalf of the Department of Insurance, and we do that because those laws were set up such that if we file properly and the forms are followed, we're pretty sure that policy is going to be legit. And by the way, it's going to make sure we don't encroach on the admitted market, which is a tension that we are created to essentially referee, or to ensure there's not an overlap. So all these guys are potential, all these people are potential filers. So in the olden days, well, and so you might ask yourself, well, how many filings are we talking about? Anybody have any idea? Yeah, you guys didn't read my annual report. Last year, and this includes backlog filings, but there are around 920,000 filings. 920,000 filings. So think about 7 years ago, when there were half that many, this is what Bob was talking about, the paper monster, the broker would typically print out their policy, their endorsement, their renewal, send it to us in the mail along with a paper check, because we could only accept paper checks 7 years ago, and we would get it and we would review it. Or they could email it to us and we would print it out, and then they would mail us the paper check, right? And we would print out all those policies. That's the million sheets of paper. Well, if that happened today, there's twice as many policies. It's 2 million sheets of paper. We couldn't fit in our offices. We had 2 million sheets of paper in the offices, right? And imagine paying for 2 million sheets of paper to be housed in San Francisco at $80 a square foot, right? That's an expensive paper. So what did we do? Well, we wanted to live by our vision statement, which says we want to be a modern, credible leader. So 7 years ago, we started a modernization project, and that project included creating a modern workforce, a modern workspace, and creating a modern work system. And the system that you heard Bob refer to, the CAS system, California Automation Suite, had 2 sides to it. One side's the broker side, one side's the SLA side. The broker side is a follow the sun model. That means anywhere the sun shines or has shined, you can file from. So you can be essentially anywhere on the planet and you can file a policy. You can be anywhere on the planet and check where how that policy is doing in terms of being processed, and you can pay for it from anywhere on the planet. Imagine the savings, right? Just in stamps, postage, time, efficiency. Those things are important, but equally important, or perhaps more important, is the accuracy. A paper filing submission typically has about a 35% error rate. An online filing typically has an error rate of 3% or less. So by getting virtually everybody converted over to filing online, that error rate has really shrunk. And that's what it's all about for us, right? It's all about proper filings. It's all about proper compliance. We want 0. See, you got your work cut out for you. No more errors. We're going to help. We're going to help through better systems. We're going to make compliance easier. We're going to provide better education. Bob hit on some of that already. But that's critical, because that's what we're here to do. We're here to make sure it's a fair, healthy, competitive marketplace. We do that by making sure we follow the law and we follow it to the point. Okay? So that's a note about that. That's section 1. Section 2. I want to talk about the stamping fee. I was surprised nobody in here bombarded me about raising the stamping fee. But this is an important function of the SLA. This is how the SLA is funded, of course. And I've been asked, well, let me throw some numbers at you. I mean, the economy relative to surplus lines anyway is doing great. Last year, let's see, our organic, by the way, our organic item count, by organic I mean without the backlog, was around 730,000 items. So that's what the year would have been if we didn't get rid of all the backlog. Next year, it'll probably be 730 to 760. Item count isn't increasing as fast as premium, by the way. Premium last year, we're saying now, and these numbers will get better as time goes on because we'll be able to run reports by effective date versus filing date, the date they were filed. We're looking at about a 16% increase last year in processed premium. And I've heard lots of numbers from lots of people, but that's the market aggregate for California. And the total organic premium processed is right around $9 billion, somewhere between 8.9 to 9.1 billion. So that's the largest of any state in the country, which isn't surprising considering we're the 5th largest economy on the planet, right? So a lot going on. And you say, well, if it's growing, why would you raise the stamping fee? That doesn't make sense. That's a good point you make. Let me try and answer it. So here's what's been happening. For the last several years, essentially the last 2.5 years, we've been hearing a lot about recession. Recession, 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 right? I've got one friend sends me a recession text every day. Recession next week, recession tomorrow. I'm like, hey man, I thought you said the recession was gonna be yesterday. He's like, I was wrong, it's tomorrow. So this is, he's in my head. That's not why we raised the stamping fee. A lot of people were talking about recession and we're trying to say, well, okay, you can't really predict it, can you? When there's recession, so we raised the stamping fee. We had board discussions about it for longer than a year. We brought this up as an action item at board meetings. We talked about it, we tabled it, et cetera, without getting down in the weeds, let alone there was a lot of discussion, a lot of, well, what would you do with the money? How much would it be? How do you plan this out? And that kept going on with this background recession. Then all of a sudden, something happened. The yield curve inverted. And I'm sure you're all yield curve economists, and I probably don't need to explain this, but I will. When the yield curve inverts, there's a theory that says, it's not really a theory, there's a fact that says that on average, for the last 50 years, 22 months after the yield curve inverts, the US enters a recession. That's been true of every recession in the last 50 years except one. Hopefully this will be the second. However, if something is more probable than not to happen, you probably need to plan for it. At least that was our view. So we're thinking if we didn't plan for it, it's really on us, right? If we waited till we were in a recession and then raised the stamping fee, that would look irresponsible. However, if we're on notice that a recession is likely, more likely than not, because of historical averages, and we plan for it, that's probably more responsible. So that's what happened. So that was the point that checked. But we didn't stop there. We said, okay, if a recession hits 22 months after the yield curve inverts, does that mean it hits us 22 months? And I remembered thinking back when I used to work for the property casualty insurers. We did a study and we found that insurance tends to be a little countercyclical, right? We tend to be a little recession resistant. So we went back and looked at our data for the last 50 years and we found that, yeah, in fact, the association really doesn't get hit for a year after the recession hits. So if the yield curve inverted in, what was it, March? Oh, here it is, March of 19. That means you can expect a recession in January of 21. But we, thankfully, because we're a little bit countercyclical, won't really feel it until probably January 22. Okay, so we have 3 years. What are you going to do in those 3 years? Well, if we raise the stamping fee, well, and why would you do it? Well, 2 reasons. If you know a recession's coming, what's the right strategy? 1, we thought, 3 things, right? Everything in threes. 1, get rid of your bad debts. Right? We have a pension liability of $6 million. We have a construction loan of $1 million. Let's get rid of those. Number 2, let's cut costs. Right? We've been doing that all along because as we're trying to build up this army of analysts to attack the backlog, we've been funding that by cost reduction, including moving out of the city. So we have a small footprint here, but we moved to San Ramon, saved ourselves about $1 million. So that's how we've been funding that. And then number 3, put a little money away for when the recession hits to help you ride it out. Right? So you lower your cost structure, put some money away for when you need it. And that's exactly what we're looking to do. So over these 3 years, before the recession should hit us, affect us, we think we're going to be able to bring in around $8.4 million. And so the follow-up question is, okay, what are you going to do with $8.4 million? 1, pay off the pension. That's $6 million. We're $6 million shy. The delta between what we have and what we need to pay off the pension is $6 million, which, by the way, is spectacular, right? I mean, think about every municipality in the country that has a pension fund and can't pay it off. Right? All those pensioners who were made a promise, and that promise is not going to be kept. Your association is different. We made a promise, we're keeping that promise. That's part of being a credible leader, right? If you make a promise and keep the promise, your credibility goes up. Make a promise, don't keep the promise, credibility goes down, right? This is part of our vision statement. So with this, we're going to be able to keep that promise. And that promise is good forever. It's done. Pensioners will be taken care of. 100% of the promise made, kept. Secondarily, get rid of the construction loan. This has been paid down, it's around $1 million. Then that leaves about $1.4 million. That'll go into contingencies. That's a contingency fund for us as an operating account and a reserve account that we draw on when we need money, such as when there's a recession. But keep in mind, we've also already gotten rid of the pension liability and we've reduced our carrying cost on these 2 debts. And that carrying cost is about $1 million. Right now, the pension costs us about $600,000. We have to, by the time we pay them, what the actuaries, they do their INU voodoo, and then they say, you owe $500,000. And so we pay that, and then there's a pension guarantee fund you have to pay, and then you have to pay the actuaries, of course, for their voodoo. it's about 600 grand. And then the loan is about 400 grand. So it's about $1 million of carrying costs. So if there's a recession and our stamping fees go down $1 million, we're still even, just by getting rid of that bad debt. So that's what we're doing. That's what this is all about. I hope that answers any questions you might have had about the stamping fee. We were told years and years ago when I started, it was a group like this, and I asked about stamping fee. Do you even care? Because I looked at the history of stamping fees. We raised it or lowered it every year, sometimes mid-year. And we said, do you care? And actually we said, show of hands, who cares? Every hand went up. We hate it when you do that, blah, blah. So we promised 5 years. Wouldn't raise it for 5 years. We figured we could budget to that. We made 7 years in a month. So it's a credible leader. Promised you 5 years. We beat that by 2 years in a month. So keeping our word. If that doesn't answer any questions, I'll be around. You can ask me afterwards. That was part 2 of my presentation. Part 3 of my presentation is the shortest but most personal. This is the last time I'm going to be on stage today. I want to take the opportunity to thank Bob for being our chairman for these 2 years. Bob is our first 2-year chairman. This was a change in governance that the board made. Yeah. The thinking a couple years ago was 1 year really isn't enough. For those of you who've been chairs or been on boards, you probably would agree that, boy, it's hard to figure out a whole, you got your day job. Then you got to go figure out a whole nother organization in a year. By the time you figured it out, you're out, right? And so what we tried to do is we tried to create the chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, so that, by the time you got up to chair, you were already pretty prepared, but there's really just nothing like being in that seat, making those decisions, influence the organization from that level. There's nothing like actually doing it. And so we said, okay, why don't we do 2 years? Really as an experiment, but it's one that absolutely has paid off. I think it was absolutely the right thing to do. Bob was the exact right guy to be the first one to do it. He's been all in on the association from day one, 100%. And if you ask my employees, the number one thing I want is I want you to care, because I care. Right? So I don't want to be around people who don't care. It sucks the energy out of you. Bob cares. Bob cares more than anyone I've seen about this organization. And so Bob, it's been a real honor, real pleasure. Thank you, Bob. And that's it for me. Thank all of you.
Please welcome the COO and Director of the SLA, Joy Irvin.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Joy Irvin. I am the COO and Director of the Surplus Line Association of California. And today we are here on important business. Our annual meeting is the time we set aside to share with our members information about the association, to elect our officers, review our fiscal health, provide statistics on filed premiums, and discuss important trends in our industry. At every table, there's a copy of our annual report for you to take with you that showcases the results of your efforts. Does everyone have a copy of this? Ben actually made reference to it, and if you go through it, in years past, I would spend a lot of time going through some of the statistics. And now we have a beautiful brochure for you to take with you, and if you have any comments or feedback, we would love to hear it. It's something new for us, and we're really excited about it. Bob Gilbert highlighted for you the successes of the association, and he discussed how we focused on service and innovation. And Ben McKay discussed how the SLA is functioning as an ally to the public, as well as an asset and resource to its members. And I'm going to share with you how we have approached the last piece of our vision statement, a great place to work for the SLA employees. And that starts with culture. You will see examples of our culture of community and learning in the following video that highlights our interns' activities last year.
Hi, I'm Jody Black, Vice President of Data Analysis here at the Surplus Line Association of California. In 2019, we rolled out an internship through the summer to invite college students from all over to work here and learn a lot about the surplus line industry and learn a lot about the Surplus Line Association of California. With this internship, we had two objectives. One, to expose them to the surplus line industry, and two, have them analyze and register policies with the Department of Insurance.
In the surplus line internship program, I learned a lot about insurance that I had no idea went into insurance necessarily.
I didn't realize, even as like a 20-year-old adult, like what the insurance world really could be.
My first perception of insurance is just, oh, insurance, Geico, Allstate, car insurance. Like, I didn't know it was everything, you know?
My initial thought was that it wasn't gonna be like super fun. It was gonna be quite boring.
They have to sort of like dispel the sort of misconceptions that the insurance industry is all boring in a sense.
At first, I wasn't too sure if I was able to do it because they're like spitting all these SIC codes at me and coverage codes and teaching me all these naming rules, and it was a lot. But I had really good teachers.
The employees at the Surplus Line Association all just want you to, feel at home, and they want you to be successful in your future and here now.
Honestly, my favorite experience within this SLA internship is the field trips.
Going out into the city and just seeing all the different things that people do in the insurance industry.
Going to the San Francisco office as well as going to the broker's office is very informational.
It's not the initial impression you would get from a typical office setting, like kind of boring or dreary.
And they actually talked to us, and like we learned a lot about what they do themselves and how that ties into us.
Cool to see how they operate, what their building looks like, and how their day-to-day operation goes.
Very nice office there. The people there are just as nice.
It was a fun, great environment, and it was educational, so I think that was great.
The idea of the internship program came about just shortly after I started with the SLA in 2018. I met with Ben McKay, CEO of the SLA. We just happened to start talking about this in the lunchroom, and I said, what if we took on an internship next summer? It gives us an opportunity to expose college students to what we do, learn a little bit more about the insurance industry in general. And then also it would help us with one of our objectives was to reduce some of our inventory. So that was how it was very different. I really wanted them to go back to college, go back to their next year, really having something that they could say they learned over the summer. I'm not just saying I dropped off coffee and picked up dry cleaning.
It's really amazing. Like, everyone needs insurance, and the people who can't get it from those home and auto places need someone to go to. And I really enjoy just learning all the different things that you can get insured, like Rihanna's legs.
Did they insure one leg, or do they have to pay for both? Did they get a deal on that sort of thing?
I don't know. I didn't know how to even feel about it. It was just weird.
Keith Richards from the Rolling Stones, he had his fingers insured.
Like Troy Polamalu, the ex-football player, he actually has his hair insured.
Which most of the time it's celebrities that do that.
Just the other day, I found this policy of an insurer trying to insure pets for Hollywood.
I think it was Neil Diamond. He was trying to insure a collection of coins.
Anything you can think of, dogs, cats.
Each piece was worth about $1,500.
Gerbils.
So he was trying to insure all the coins, so it came out to be like a lot.
All for Hollywood production. I thought that was pretty interesting.
During the internship, it wasn't always just processing policies. We actually had a Super Smash Brothers tournament.
It's very fun. I didn't win, but it was really exciting to see people very passionate about that game and just come together at the office.
One big activity that I participated in was the basketball game that all the employees were invited to.
The basketball tournament was a lot of fun.
We had early on in the summer a softball game that the whole office was taking part of. I've played softball in high school, so it was pretty fun, like being able to actually put some points on the board, and it was competitive, but everyone was having a really good time.
It really felt comforting and relaxing because like it breaks like the monotony of doing all the work, but also like getting to know all the other DAs on the floor. It was really nice. I actually got to meet a couple of new people that I think I would probably stay in contact with.
So I'm glad that it just shows like people want to come out and like be with their coworkers and like hang out and, I don't know, just have fun.
Our goal with this internship is to develop the next generation of insurance professionals, which is crucial to the future of this industry. And we look forward to the next round of SLA interns.
Doesn't that look like a great place to work? We just love that video, and we had such a great time hosting the interns. They were really funny. I'm sure you noted that 3 times they talked about boring. And we showed them that the insurance industry is anything but boring. It is filled with lively people, the sense of family, the sense of community. And we had interns that were the sons and daughters of some of the people that worked at our companies. And they were like, they had no idea what their parents did all day, and they had this better perception. We had different people from the brokerage community that sent over people that they knew, young people. And we'll be doing it again this year. So you'll be seeing communications from us about that. And we really had a good time spending time outside of the office, creating relationships, because that really helps our staff work together as a team. And why does it matter that we want to be a great place to work? And there's many reasons why we would want to be a great place. Happy employees are productive employees. Low turnover is better financially. Recruiting top talent is easier when you have a strong reputation. But a great place to work goes beyond providing benefits. It goes beyond providing a modern office space. And when we sponsored this internship program, we realized we are shaping the next generation of leaders. And we encourage continued education for our employees. We have provided opportunities to move and grow within our organization. We participate in volunteer efforts through the IICF as well as other charities, and so that our staff can feel connected to their communities. And the SLA has created a very diverse workforce that is made up of various cultures, genders, ages, personalities, as well as background experience. And I would personally like to thank the SLA staff, the SLA board, for helping us achieve our vision of a great place to work. Thank you.
Now, this is what we call the audience participation part. I'd like to announce the slate for the 2020 Board of Directors as chosen by the nominating committee. Because the meeting is being held in 2 locations, we may not have all the members here, but for those present, please raise your hand briefly as I call your names. Ms. Terry Moran, SLA Chair, Paul Hansen, Partners. Ms. Janet Beaver, SLA Vice Chair, Tokyo Marine HCC Casualty Group. Mr. Rich Gobler, SLA Secretary Treasurer, Burns & Wilcox. Past Chair, Markel West Insurance Services. Mr. Tim Shea, R.E. Shea & Associates. Mr. Jim Faley, Bella Insurance Services. Mr. Hank Haldeman, Worldwide Facilities. Mr. Jason Howard, CRC Group. Ms. Pam Quillisi, Krause & Associates Insurance Services of Northern California. Mr. Charles Rossen, RT Specialty. Ms. Kathy Schroeder, Sierra Specialty Insurance Services. Mr. Terrence Villar, Amwins. And finally, last but not least, the best dressed board member or insurance person in the world, Mr. John Washington, Arch Insurance Group. Before I go to the floor for any additional nominations, I'd like to remind the membership that each nominee must consent to the nomination, present his or her qualifications, and undergo a background check by the CDI and the SLA. At this time, are there any other nominations? Okay. Without objection, nominations are closed, and we will now proceed to a vote on the slate. All in favor of electing the slate as determined by the nominating committee, please signify by saying aye. All opposed, signify by saying no. Great. Motion carries. Just want to say, by the way, welcome to the Board of Directors. Thank you. Just want to say one thing that's really interesting about our board. We've had tremendous boards for as long as I've been associated in California, but this is a very diverse board. We have 5 board members from Northern California, 7 from Southern California, and 1 from Central Valley in California. So we think that everybody is fully represented, and that alone really makes Ben and Joy and their senior staff extremely happy. One of the things that I've asked them to do, and they're doing it as we speak, is to go to your offices, get to know you, and understand what you do for a living on a day-to-day basis and stuff that really matters to you. So when they're in your office, feel free to basically tell them how we, the association, can help you. Before we conclude our program today, we have a couple of additional items of business to address. First, I'm pleased to announce that the nominating committee has approved the renomination of Judge Harry Lowe as mediator. May I have a motion to reappoint Judge Harry Lowe as mediator? So moved. Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed, say no. Perfect. Motion carries. I'd like to thank Harry Lowe for agreeing to continue in his role as the SLA's mediator. I'd like to call at this time waiving of the minutes for 2019. We're scheduled to have a reading of the minutes from the previous meeting, but these minutes were posted online last week for your review, and you should have received an email. Is there a motion to waive the reading of the previous meetings minutes and approve them as posted? Is there a second? All in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed, say no. Motion carries, and the minutes are approved.
While others sign their policies with a ballpoint pen, he signs his with the quill John Hancock signed the Declaration of Independence with. And for most people, a simple paperclip would suffice. But for him, he uses 24-karat gold staples. He is the most interesting man in insurance.
I don't always drink whiskey, and I'm really not all that interesting. When I do drink whiskey, I drink the spirit distilled in the spirit of Robert Gilbert. I drink Clan Gilbert, Chairman's Reserve.
Bottled in Brooklyn, New York since 1954 and aged to perfection in Southern California. Clan Gilbert 100 proof Chairman's Reserve Whiskey. Simply the best.
So here's to you, Robert Gilbert, the most interesting man in insurance. Thank you for all your service to the SLA.
Thinking about having a little taste of this fine whiskey, except I don't drink whiskey, but Bob, I'd like to present this to you first. This is your bottle of Clan Gilbert.
Thank you. So nice.
If you'd like. Good afternoon, everybody. Today I have the honor of making a special presentation to honor our outgoing chair, Robert Gilbert, commemorating his 2 years as board chair, but also his many years of service to the SLA and the wholesale and surplus lines broker community. On a more personal note, I have worked very closely with Bob for the last several years on the board, And for those of you that have the fortune of knowing him, you all know that he's a very warm, caring, intelligent, and of course, handsome man. Bob is originally from New York, but he has spent many years in Southern California as a successful insurance executive. But not only is he the most interesting man in insurance, he's also the most tan man in insurance. At dinner last night, one of our dinner companions was commenting. She's known Bob for, I guess, over 20 years now, and she had made the comment that she had attended an event with him, didn't really know him yet, but when she left that evening, she was talking to someone, she says, I want to work for that guy. You remember that guy? That tan guy. That's the guy I want to work for. So it was a fun remembrance last night. On a more serious note, I would like to detail his service to the SLA. Bob served 2 stints as on the board from 1999 to 2001, and again since 2015. He served as chair the last 2 years, vice chair in 2001 and 2017, and secretary-treasurer in 2016. He has been on 5 SLA committees, and at various times he chaired them. That included the Technology Committee, the Education Committee, the Stamping Committee, and the Audit Committee. He also spent a year on the Legislative Committee. Only a few of our members have been as involved and dedicated to the surplus lines business and the association as he has the last 25 years. Today we honor Bob with the replica of the Lutein Bell, which hangs in the Lloyd's underwriting room in London. I'm going to give you a little history on that, but I'm going to have to read it because I can't keep these dates straight. A long time ago. I would like to take a moment and talk about this award. The story starts in 1793 when the French ship La Lutine surrendered to the British at Toulon. The British didn't enjoy their good fortune for long as the rechristened HMS Lutine sank 6 years later off the Dutch coast. When the Lutine sank, it was carrying a cargo of gold and silver bullion, then valued at about £1 million. What is the present value of that? Somebody must know that. Lloyd's underwriters, of course, paid the claim in full. Salvage attempts continued for 60 years, and in 1859, Lloyd's recovered the ship's bell and hung it in the underwriting room at the Royal Exchange in London. You should go see it sometime. It's really cool looking. I'll show it to you again in a second. Traditionally, when Lloyd's received news that an overdue ship had arrived safely or had been lost, it would ring the bell twice for good news and once for bad news, so that everyone with an interest in that ship could learn the news simultaneously. Now it will ring the bell twice to signify that Bob has safely arrived at the end of his chairmanship. So I can do this right. So here's the newly formatted Lutein Bell.
Where is he?
Where'd he go?
Where's the guy? Okay.
Patrick, we have to stand here for a minute. You left. Thank you.
Thank you.
That's yours, but I'm.
Right there.
Thank you. And you can't take that whiskey yet. I got to give it to you again.
Okay.
But it might be a couple shots shy. Okay. That's really heavy. Thank you all.
Thanks, Terry. Now, I know everybody is ready for food and drink, and so am I, but I was happy that Terry didn't give me a replica of the Titanic. That would not have been a good gift. A couple of things I want to say before I leave. Number one, I really, truly want to thank the senior staff of the SLA. Incredible, hardworking, caring individuals that really give a damn about you guys. So I wanted to thank all of them. More importantly, I want to thank these 3 individuals that have put this together in this beautiful ballroom. Phaedra Jackson, Debbie Carr, and a woman that has the same last name as yours truly, Caroline Gilbert. Thank you. So I know that most of you, if not all of you in this room, are disappointed about the results of the Super Bowl. But there's a gentleman here, and his first name is the same as his last name, Tay, who has really handled all of the audio and everything else, working with James Green in the back. I want to thank both of you. We call him, by the way, we call him Tay Squared. And Tay lives and was born, I believe, in Kansas City, Missouri. All right? And he went to Kansas City to watch the game and managed to get back last night in time to do this. Tay, thank you. And I am concluding right now, but I have to read a quote, well, not a quote. I have to read something to you that I saw a couple of weeks ago while I was in Miami that really caught my attention and is perfect for surplus line professionals. And right outside this restaurant, there was this sign. And the sign said, and I quote, "We are here because we are not all there." Having said that, thank you. Food and drink in the back.